He erased her from their children's lives to crown his mistress queen, his family cheering as if she'd never existed. What none of them knew was that the quiet wife they discarded had just inherited an empire worth more than their entire bloodline. Then she walked into the celebration. The clapping died first. Tonight you are going to watch a man tell his own children that their mother was dead. You are going to watch him crown another woman queen, while the real queen stood quiet in the back of the room. And you are going to watch the moment that quiet woman walked through a pair of golden doors and made an entire ballroom forget how to breathe. So before we start, do something for me. If you have ever been thrown away by the very people who swore to love you, tap that subscribe button right now. Stay until the very end, because the last 5 minutes of this story will break your heart and then put it back together stronger than before. Her name was Imani, and this is the night the world found out who she really was. The ballroom glowed like the inside of a jewelry box. Gold light fell from the ceiling. Crystal glasses caught it and threw it back. 200 of the city's most important people stood shoulder to shoulder in their finest clothes, and every one of them had come to celebrate one man. His name was Damon. He stood near the front of the room in a black tuxedo that fit him like it was painted on. He was being honored that night as the city's Man of the Year. There was a banner behind the stage with his face on it. There was applause every time he so much as smiled. He had built himself into the kind of man people whispered about with respect, and tonight the whispering had become cheering. Through the crowd, near the back wall, a woman moved quietly. She wore a simple dark dress, no diamonds, no designer name stitched into the fabric. Her hair was pulled back soft and plain. She had arrived late and she had come alone, and she had slipped in through a side door because she did not want to interrupt his big night. That was Imani. That was his wife. 8 years of marriage. 2 children sleeping at home. A whole life built brick by brick beside this man. She watched him from the back of the room, and for one moment her heart lifted, because this was the man she had loved when he had nothing. This was the man she had fed when his pockets were empty. And tonight the whole world finally saw what she had always seen in him. She did not know that he had stopped seeing her a long time ago. Damon climbed the steps to the stage. The room hushed. He took the microphone with the ease of a man who knew everyone was already listening. He thanked the city. He thanked his business partners. And then his voice dropped into something warmer, something that made the crowd lean in. None of this, he said, would have been possible without the woman who stood beside me. Imani's breath caught in her chest. Her hand pressed flat against her heart. She took one small step forward, ready, hopeful, waiting for him to find her face in the crowd. But Damon did not look to the back of the room. He turned to his left. He reached out his hand, and from the side of the stage walked a tall woman in a blood-red gown, her smile already practiced, her arm already lifting to meet his. Her name was Vanessa. The crowd erupted, they clapped, they cheered. Vanessa took her place beside Damon like she had been standing there all her life, and he wrapped his arm around her waist and pulled her close, and the two of them glowed under the gold light like the couple on top of a wedding cake. Imani stood frozen at the back of the room. She did not understand. Not at first. Her mind reached for a reason, any reason, the way a drowning person reaches for the surface. Maybe a business partner, maybe a misunderstanding, maybe. Then she heard the laughter. To her right, near a tall table draped in white, stood Damon's mother, a proud woman named Loretta, dressed in deep purple dripping in gold. She was speaking to a guest beside her, and she was not even bothering to lower her voice. "That woman in the back?" Loretta said, tilting her chin toward Imani like she was pointing at a stain. "She was never really one of us. My son just took a little long to clean house." The guest chuckled. Loretta chuckled. And a few feet away, Damon's younger brother Terence laughed loudest of all, raising his glass toward Imani in a cruel little toast, as if her pain were the entertainment of the evening. Husband on the stage, mother to the side, brother in the crowd. 3 blades all turned toward her at once, all in the same breath. But the deepest cut was still coming. Damon raised his hand to quiet the room. He smiled that smile the whole city loved. And then, in front of 200 witnesses, in front of cameras, in front of God, he said the words that would haunt every person who heard them. "For those of you who've asked about my children's mother," Damon said, his voice smooth as silk, "I want to set the record straight. She is gone. She's no longer a part of our lives. And tonight, I'm proud to introduce the woman who will be." Gone? He let them believe it. He let 200 people believe his children's mother had died. And he said it while she stood 20 feet behind him, alive, breathing, listening. The room softened with sympathy. People placed hands on their chests. A widower, they thought, a grieving father who had found love again. How brave, how beautiful. Nobody turned around. Nobody saw her. Imani did not scream. She did not run. She did not fall to her knees the way her whole body begged her to. She looked down at her own 2 hands, and in her right hand, hidden in her palm, pressed so tight that the metal had left a mark in her skin, was a small brass key tied to a faded red ribbon. She closed her fingers around it. She turned, quietly, and walked back out through the side door she had come in. Nobody noticed her leave. They were too busy clapping. But here is what none of them knew. Here is the thing that would, in just a few short weeks, bring every single one of them to their knees. 3 days before that gala, a lawyer had called Imani's phone, and the woman they had just buried with a lie was about to become the most powerful person any of them would ever meet. They mistook her silence for weakness. It was the gravest mistake of their lives. To understand the woman who walked out of that ballroom, you have to go back. Far back, to a small house at the end of a dirt road, where the porch leaned a little to the left, and the screen door never quite closed all the way. That was where Imani was raised. Not by her mother, who had passed when she was small, but by her grandmother. A tall, slow-moving woman with hands like worn leather and a voice like a warm blanket. Her grandmother did not have much. The cabinets were often near empty. The winters were long and the heat was thin. But that woman had a rule, and she lived by it until the day she died. You feed the stranger before you feed yourself. Imani grew up watching it. A man would come up the road, hungry, ragged, a stranger from nowhere going nowhere, and her grandmother would sit him down at the table and put the last of the cornbread on his plate. Then she would smile at little Imani and say the same thing every single time. "Baby, kindness is a debt. The world always pays it back. It just pays back late." Imani believed her. She believed her with her whole heart. There was one thing in that house that mattered more than anything else. It was not a television. It was not jewelry. It was a small brass key tied to a faded red ribbon, and it hung on a nail by the front door for as long as Imani could remember. She used to ask about it. "What does it open, Grandma? Where's the door?" And her grandmother would just smile and shake her head slow. "That key isn't for a door you've found yet," she would say. "One day it'll open something nobody around you will expect. You keep it close, and when the time comes, you'll know." When her grandmother passed, that brass key was the only thing Imani took with her. Not the furniture, not the old photographs, just that small piece of metal on a faded red ribbon, because it carried the only voice that had ever told her she mattered. She carried it into her marriage. She carried it through every cold word from Loretta. She carried it the night Damon stopped looking at her. Through all of it, the key stayed close, a small weight against her heart, A promise she was starting to believe was just a story an old woman told a lonely little girl. But Imani never stopped living by the rule. Even in the city, even married into a family that looked down on her, she gave. She gave her time. She gave her hands. 3 evenings a week, while Damon worked late and Loretta hosted her dinners, Imani drove to a quiet community home on the east side of the city, and she sat with the people the world had forgotten. That was where she met Mama Odessa. Mama Odessa was old, older than anyone knew. She sat by the window in a thin gray sweater, and most days she did not speak at all. The staff said she had no family, no visitors, nobody came. She was just a frail old woman waiting quietly for the end, the kind of person the world walks past without a second glance. Imani did not walk past. She sat with Mama Odessa every visit. She brushed her hair. She warmed her hands. She told her about the children. She read to her from old books with cracked spines. She never asked the old woman for a single thing. She did not even know if Mama Odessa could hear her. But she came. Week after week, year after year. She came when she was happy, and she came when she was breaking. She came on the nights Damon made her feel like nothing, and she would sit beside that silent old woman and feel for 1 hour like somebody. And here is the part that matters. Here is the part that tells you everything about who Imani was. In those years, Imani had almost nothing of her own. Damon controlled the home. He controlled the accounts. There were weeks when she had to count out coins from the bottom of her purse just to put gas in the car to drive to that community home. There were nights she skipped her own dinner so the twins could have seconds, telling them she wasn't hungry, smiling so they wouldn't see. The poverty was the quiet kind, the kind that hides behind a nice address, the kind where one missed paycheck means the lights flicker and the heart pounds. She knew that fear. She lived inside it. And still, even with empty hands, she gave her time to a stranger by a window who could give her nothing back. She did not know who Mama Odessa really was. She did not know that the frail old woman in the thin gray sweater had a name that, spoken in the right rooms, made powerful men go quiet. She did not know that decades ago, before the silence, before the forgetting, that old woman had built something vast with her own 2 hands, and then watched her own family circle it like wolves until she walked away from all of them in disgust. Imani did not know any of that. She just knew that nobody else was sitting with the old woman by the window. So, she sat. The cruelty did not happen all at once. Cruelty rarely does. It comes slow, like poison in a cup of tea, one small drop at a time, until one day you realize you have been drinking it for years. It started with Loretta's whispers. Damon's mother had never liked Imani. From the very first day, she looked at the girl from the dirt road and saw something beneath her family. And over the years, drop by drop, she poured that poison straight into her son's ear. "You've outgrown her, Damon. Look at you now. Look at her. Does she fit the life you've built? A man like you needs a woman who understands this world. She'll always be that little country girl. You can dress her up, but you can't change where she came from. I'm only saying what a mother sees. She's holding you back. She always has." Damon listened. That was the tragedy of it. He listened, and there was someone else pouring poison too. Vanessa had come into Damon's life through his business, sharp and polished and patient. She did not chase him. She was smarter than that. She simply made herself into a mirror that showed Damon the man he wanted to believe he was. Important, powerful, too big for the wife waiting at home. Between the two of them, Loretta and Vanessa, they built a story, and the story was simple. Imani was the past. Imani was the weight. Imani was the mistake a great man makes when he is young and poor and does not yet know his worth. Then the lies turned sharp. Loretta began to whisper that Imani had been unfaithful. There was no truth in it, not a single thread. But Loretta said it with such certainty again and again that Damon began to let it live in his mind. He started watching his wife with cold eyes. He started looking for guilt in her face that was never there. Imani felt the change like a winter coming. She did not understand it. She tried harder. She cooked the meals he liked. She kept the house warm. She tried to talk to him at night, and he turned his back. She tried to touch his shoulder, and he flinched away. She did not know they had already decided she was guilty of a crime she never committed. Then came the day that broke something in her. She came home from the community home one evening and found her key no longer worked in the front door. The locks had been changed. Her own house, her own front door. And when she knocked, it was Vanessa who answered, standing in Imani's hallway, wearing a robe from Imani's closet, smiling like she owned the air. "Oh," Vanessa said softly, "he didn't tell you? You can't stay here anymore." Behind her, Imani saw her own living room, already different. New furniture, new colors, her family photographs taken down off the walls, erased, like she had never lived there at all. "My children," Imani whispered. "Where are my babies?" Vanessa's smile did not move. "They're adjusting. Children are strong. They'll forget." And then the door closed in Imani's face. She stood on the porch of her own home in the cold. She did not have a key that worked anymore. The only key she had was the small brass one on the faded red ribbon, and it opened nothing she could find. The days after that were dark. Damon's lawyers moved fast. Papers came, signatures were forged or pressured or simply taken. Step by step, they cut her out of the life she had built. They told the courts a careful story. They told the neighbors another. And to the twins, her own babies, they told the cruelest story of all. They told them their mother had gone away, that she wasn't coming back, that maybe in a way they were too young to understand, she was simply gone. Vanessa told them to call her something new, and slowly the twins stopped asking for their mother. Because every time they asked, a door closed. So they stopped asking. And that silence, that small new silence where her children's voices used to be, was the thing that finally broke Imani all the way down. She found a small room to rent on the far side of the city. Thin walls, one window. She would sit on the edge of the bed in the dark for hours and not move. The woman who had always given, always smiled, always believed the world paid kindness back, sat in that little room and felt the belief drain out of her like blood from a wound. She stopped eating much. She stopped sleeping right. She went numb. The kind of numb where you stop crying, not because the pain is gone, but because you've run out of the strength to feel it. One night, she held the brass key in her hand and stared at it for a long, long time. Her grandmother's voice came back to her. "Kindness is a debt. The world always pays it back." "You lied to me, Grandma," she whispered into the dark. "I gave everything, and look at me." She held the key over the trash can by the bed. Her fingers loosened. She was ready, finally, to let go of the last thing tying her to a promise that had failed her. And right then, in that exact moment, her phone rang. She almost didn't answer, but something, some small last thread of who she used to be, made her pick it up. The voice on the other end was calm and careful, a lawyer's voice. "Is this Imani?" the man asked. "I'm calling about a woman you knew, a woman named Odessa. I'm very sorry to tell you that she passed away 3 days ago." Imani's hand tightened around the key. "But before she passed," the lawyer went on slowly, "she left very specific instructions, and every one of them was about you. We need you to come in as soon as possible. There are things about Odessa that you don't know, things that change everything." Imani sat very still in the dark. She did not yet understand what doctor that small brass key had been waiting her whole life to open, but she was about to find out. Weeks passed, and in those weeks the city buzzed about another night, an even bigger night than the last. Damon had reached the top of the mountain. A grand gala was being thrown in his honor, the crown jewel of the season, held in the most spectacular ballroom the city had to offer. Everyone who mattered would be there. Cameras, reporters, the whole shining world. And on his arm, finally, openly, would be Vanessa. There was a ring on her finger now. The wedding was already being planned. Tonight was the night Damon would present her to the world not as a guest, but as his future. The night he would finish erasing the woman from the dirt road and replace her completely. The ballroom was even grander than before. Marble floors, towering golden doors at the entrance, tall as two men, polished until they shined like the sun. Damon stood near the front, in white this time, glowing, untouchable. Loretta sat at the head table in her finest, beaming at the son who had done exactly as she'd told him. Terence laughed too loud at every joke. Vanessa moved through the room like she had been born for it. They had everything. They had won. They were sure of it. The lights dimmed for Damon's toast. A waiter handed crystal glasses down the rows. Damon climbed the steps, took the microphone, and looked out at a room full of people who adored him. "Tonight," he began, "I want to talk about new beginnings." And that was when the golden doors at the back of the ballroom opened. They did not creak, they did not bang, they simply swung wide, slow and smooth, and the light from the hall poured in behind a single figure standing in the doorway. It was a woman. She stood tall. She stood still, and as she stepped forward into the gold light of the ballroom, 200 heads turned, one by one, like a wave rolling across the room. It was Imani. But not the Imani in the plain dark dress who had slipped in through a side door and been laughed at. This woman wore a gown the color of deep midnight, simple and perfect, the kind of elegance that does not shout because it does not have to. She wore no fear on her face. She wore something far more frightening to the people in that room. She wore calm. She walked down the center of the ballroom, unhurried, her heels soft against the marble, and the crowd parted in front of her without anyone telling them to. The whispering started and then died, because there was something in the way she moved that made whispering feel small. On the stage, Damon's smile froze. The microphone drooped in his hand. The blood drained slowly out of his face as he watched the woman he had buried with a lie walk straight toward him, alive, unbroken, and somehow impossibly glowing. Loretta half rose from her chair, gripping the table. Vanessa's lips parted. Terence stopped laughing. Imani reached the foot of the stage. She did not climb it. She did not need to. She simply stopped and looked up at her husband, and when she spoke, her voice was so quiet that the entire room had to hold its breath to hear her. "Hello, Damon." He could not answer. His mouth opened and nothing came out. "You told all these people I was dead," she said, still soft, still calm. "You told our children I was gone." She let that sit in the silent room. "Do you want to know what I was doing while you were busy burying me?" She turned, slowly, so that she was speaking not just to him, but to the whole frozen ballroom. "For years," she said, "while this family treated me like nothing, I spent my evenings sitting with an old woman everyone else had forgotten. She had no family that came for her, no visitors. The world had thrown her away, the same way you all threw me away. So I sat with her. I brushed her hair. I held her hand. I asked for nothing because she had nothing to give. Or so I thought." She reached into a small bag at her side and drew out a single folded document. She held it up. It was not large. It did not look like much. But the lawyer, standing quietly near the doors, stepped forward now in a sharp suit and gave a single nod to confirm what no one yet understood. "Her name was Odessa," Imani said, "and a very long time ago, before the world forgot her, she built something. an empire, quietly, with her own two hands, and then she watched her own family circle it like wolves, waiting for her to die so they could carve it up. So she did something they never forgave. She walked away from every last one of them, and she waited. She waited for years in a chair by a window to see if a single person on this earth would be kind to her without knowing who she was. Imani's eyes lifted, and they found Damon's. "I was that person," she said, and in her will she left everything to, and I quote, "the only one who loved me when I was worth nothing." The room did not move. "Do you understand what that means, Damon?" Imani's voice never rose. It only grew steadier. "That old woman by the window left me an empire. Holdings in this city you couldn't count in a lifetime. Worth more than your name. More than your mother's name. More than this whole bloodline you were all so proud of. All of it added together and multiplied 100 times over." She paused. "Including this building, the marble you're standing on, the roof over this gala. As of last week, every brick of it belongs to me." A sound went through the crowd. Not a gasp. Something quieter and deeper. The sound of 200 people realizing all at once that the ground had shifted beneath their feet. And then Imani lifted her other hand. Hanging from her fingers, swinging gently, catching the gold light, was a small brass key on a faded red ribbon. "My grandmother gave me this when I was a little girl," she said softly. "She told me one day it would open a door no one around me would expect." A small, sad smile touched her lips. She was right. She was always right. Kindness is a debt, and the world finally paid it back. She let the key rest in her open palm for the whole room to see. On the stage, Damon's legs nearly gave out. The microphone slipped from his hand and hit the floor with a crack that echoed off the marble. Loretta sank back into her chair, her painted face gone gray. Vanessa stared down at the woman she had laughed at, the woman whose photographs she had taken off the walls, and the color ran out of her like water down a drain. Nobody clapped. In a room built for applause, in a night designed for cheering, not one single person could move their hands. The clapping died first, and Imani, the girl from the dirt road, the wife they called dead, the woman who fed strangers, simply turned and looked at the silent, broken faces of the people who had thrown her away. She did not gloat. She did not shout. She had already won, and she knew it, and that knowledge made her gentle. "I'm not here to take anything from you tonight," she said quietly. "You're going to lose it all on your own. I just wanted you to see my face while you still had something to lose." Then she turned, brass key in her hand, and walked back up the center of the ballroom, through the parted crowd, out through the towering golden doors. This time, every single eye in the room followed her. Here is the thing about a house built on a lie. It looks solid right up until the moment it isn't. And then it comes down all at once. Imani did not have to destroy Damon. She did something far more powerful. She simply stopped holding him up. For years, without ever knowing it, Damon had been propped up by forces bigger than himself. Doors had opened for him. Deals had landed in his lap. He thought it was his charm. He thought it was his genius. But quietly, in ways he never saw, the wide web of holdings that now belonged to Imani had been woven all through the city he did business in. And the moment that empire's hand lifted away from him, the ground he stood on simply gave way. His biggest deal collapsed within the week. Partners who had smiled at his gala stopped returning his calls. Doors that had always opened now stayed shut, and he could not understand why, because he did not know the woman holding them closed was the same woman he had called dead. The Man of the Year award was quietly rescinded. The committee released a short, cold statement. There were questions now about the things he had said on that stage, about the children's mother he had so publicly buried while she stood alive in the room. The story turned. The city that had cheered him began to murmur, and the murmur was not kind. Vanessa was the first to run. She did not even pretend. The morning the news broke that Damon's empire was crumbling, she packed her things, slid the ring off her finger, and set it on the kitchen counter without a word. She had never loved the man. She had loved the life. And the moment the life was gone, so was she. She walked out of the house she had stolen and did not look back, already searching for the next mirror to climb into. Damon stood alone in his emptying house and finally understood what he had thrown away. Loretta did not run because Loretta had nowhere to go. The proud woman who had whispered poison into her son's ear for years, who had called Imani nothing in front of a room full of people, found her phone going silent. Her invitations stopped coming. The society that had been her whole world quietly closed its doors to the mother of the man who lied about a dead wife. She tried again and again to reach Imani. She left messages, she sent letters. She begged for a single meeting, one chance to explain, to apologize, to find some way back. Imani never answered a single one. That was the punishment, not cruelty, just silence. The same silence they had once mistaken for weakness, turned now into a wall they could never climb. Terence scattered with the rest of them, his loud laugh gone quiet, suddenly very interested in pretending he had never been part of any of it. But the heart of it, the true reckoning, was not about empires or society or deals. It was about two small children. When the courts looked again at everything, with Imani's lawyers laying the truth out clean and plain, the careful story Damon had built came apart in their hands. The forged papers, the lies told to a judge, and worst of all, the cruelty of telling two young children that their living mother was dead. There is no court in the world that forgives a father for that. Imani was given full custody. She did not win it with armies of lawyers, though she could have called 100 of them now. She won it the simplest way there is. She was the one who never left. She was the one whose love had never had a price on it. And when the twins were finally brought to her, when the door of that little room opened and they saw her face, the face they had been told they would never see again, they did not hesitate. They ran to her. They crashed into her arms and held on like they were afraid she might disappear, and Imani sank to the floor and wrapped them up and pressed her face into their hair and finally, let herself cry. Not the silent crying of that dark rented room. This was different. This was the crying that comes when something broken is made whole again. "I never left you," she whispered into their hair over and over. "I never left. I was always coming back. I was always coming back for you." And outside, the empire of a man who built his life on a lie finished crumbling into dust. He had told the world his children's mother was gone. In the end, he was the one the world let go of. Time is a gentle thing when you finally let it heal you. A year later, you would not have found Imani in a marble ballroom. You would not have found her draped in gold or photographed for magazines, or seated at the head of some glittering table. She could have had all of it. The whole shining world was hers now, hers to spend however she pleased. Instead, you would have found her in a kitchen, a real one. Warm, a little worn, sunlight coming through the window over the sink, the kind of kitchen her grandmother would have loved. She stood at the counter in a soft sweater, no jewelry, her hair pulled back plain, stirring a pot on the stove, while the smell of something good filled the house. And at the table behind her, her two children laughed over their homework, their voices bright and easy, the way children's voices are supposed to be. That was the life she had chosen, not the empire. The empire was just a tool now, something she used quietly to do good, In the places the world forgot, the community homes, the leaning houses at the ends of dirt roads, the old people sitting alone by windows, it had given her power. But power had never been the thing she wanted. Peace was the thing she wanted, and peace, she had learned, was the one thing nobody could take from you and nobody could fake. On the wall by the kitchen door hung two things, side by side in simple frames. The first was a photograph of an old woman with worn leather hands and a warm, knowing smile, her grandmother. The second was a small brass key on a faded red ribbon. She had stopped carrying it. She did not need to carry it anymore. It had done what it was always meant to do. It had opened the door nobody around her expected, the door that had been waiting her entire life, the door at the end of all that quiet, patient kindness. Sometimes in the evenings after the children were asleep, Imani would stand in front of those two frames and just look, and she would hear her grandmother's voice, soft as it ever was. Kindness is a debt, baby. The world always pays it back. It just pays back late. It had paid back late, but it had paid back in full. And here, at the end of it all, is the truth this story leaves in your hands. The world will throw away the gentle and crown the cruel. It will laugh at the quiet ones and cheer for the loud. It will tell you that kindness is weakness, that softness is foolishness, that the people who give without asking are the people who get left behind. But there is a longer ledger than the one this world keeps, and on that ledger, not a single kindness is ever forgotten. Every hand you held when nobody was watching, every stranger you fed when your own plate was empty, every quiet, thankless good thing you did when there was no reward in sight, it is all written down, and it is all repaid. The empire made Imani powerful, but it was her heart, that soft, stubborn, unbreakable heart, that made her free. If this story moved something in you tonight, don't keep it to yourself. Somewhere out there, right now, a gentle soul is being thrown away by people who swore to love them. Somebody quiet is being told they are nothing. Share this story with them. Let them know their kindness is not invisible. Let them know the debt always comes due. And before you go, do one last thing for me. Tap that like button, hit subscribe, and in the comments below, type just one word, repaid, because the clapping always dies for the cruel, and one day, sooner than they think, it rises for the kind. Stay good out there. Stay patient. Your door is coming too.